Hello, welcome to Non-Dual Christianity. In this video, I want to talk about a verse from Philippians where Paul says, "Do all things without complaining or disputing." This idea of complaining or grumbling, as some translations say, is very intriguing to me because growing up, I always thought that it was more of a verbal sort of prohibition, right? As long as you're not speaking a complaint, then you're fine. And the intent was simply that people would get along better because people are not verbally complaining. Well, I want to look at that a little bit. And I want to look at this in light of another book I was reading that was talking about how one of the primary ways that our ego mind, our false sense of self, keeps itself intact and basically tricks us into thinking that that's our true nature, is through complaining. So I wonder if what's happening here is Paul is trying to point us to a deeper layer of reality by helping us notice this sort of all-pervasive attitude of complaining. That also then I want to talk about how this could help us be more blameless or innocent, and how we could experience joy on this path, because those are both concepts that Paul links to not complaining later in the passage. So complaining, whether it's verbal or thinking, they're the same. And really what it is it is a unconscious way, because we don't even know we're doing it. We don't know how extensive we're doing it. For the ego mind to basically resist whatever is happening. At its core, what it is it's the ego mind trying to escape from the present moment. Because the only thing that's threatening to the ego mind's survival, that sense that false sense of self, is if you realized who you truly are. And who you truly are is the divine, life itself. Those are all things that are only found right now, in the present. So the ego tries to do everything it can to pull us out of the present. Complaining is a great strategy and incredibly effective. So it's this pull, and it's an escape from the present by creating a story of what should not be happening right now. Or vice versa, something that should be happening which isn't. Either way though, it sort of comes up with this belief, this make-believe, about how something should be different. And maybe it takes the form of, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be doing this, this is unfair. Whatever the flavor is, those are all ways of not accepting whatever is now in the present. This could be aimed at situations or people. So if it's aimed at a person, then one of the ways that the ego complains is by assigning negative mental labels to the people that you're interacting with, right? Subtle forms of name calling. And they're ways of basically saying that person should be different. And if they were different, the situation would be different. So maybe you call people jerk, idiot. Those are a little tame. I'm sure there's others that your mind comes up with. And it's so quick and instantaneous, you don't even realize that it's happening, that your ego mind is making up the label or the story. And you just assume, well, that's how that person is, because of how instantaneous the story comes into your mind, right? That's maybe the least violent. Perhaps your ego likes to complain by screaming or shouting at people, or maybe it even goes to physical violence. So you see, there's kind of this spectrum. And the purpose of the spectrum is for the ego to resist the present by complaining about what shouldn't be happening because another person's involved. And now we can kind of see where the blameless and the innocent comes into play. Because if you don't follow this path, right, if you don't complain in the first place, then you don't even start any of the scale. So you're innocent and blameless from that standpoint. Another part that kind of plays two sides of the coin here with complaining is the emotion of resentment. So if you feel bitter, offended, something that indignant, something that would be in that resentment sort of category, it means that you are complaining, that you're resisting what is. Often resentment, perhaps always, is aimed at what other people have done to you in the past, right? So you're trying to look at a past action which can't be changed and sort of then use that to escape the present and to feel offended, resentful. And the ego does that to strengthen itself. So it complains to escape the present, and it triggers or feels resentment to escape the present. Resentment also is almost always a feeling of superiority, which also strengthens the ego. If other people are wronging you, then you're superior, right? If other people are stupid, you're superior. So you can see where these two things very much play together to strengthen that false sense of self, that voice in your head that thinks it's you, not really you. Really then, Paul's advice seems to be, don't complain, as in don't make an enemy of either another person or a life situation. Because if we are accepting what is, if we're non-reactive, then we don't create enemies. Funny enough, the other person, if they're also acting in this way, is this unconscious need of the ego to survive. So all of these fights, all of this conflict is the unconsciousness in me interacting with the unconsciousness in someone else, right? That our false identities are bumping into each other. It's just kind of interesting and perhaps more easy to forgive another person if you can see whatever behaviors as this unconscious drive instead of who they are as their identity. This has been especially difficult for me because I'm actually in a situation right now where I'm trying to balance this acceptance of what my neighbor's doing to me that I don't like, that I feel like is wronging me, right? And yet not simply trying to disengage and realizing that just because I am not complaining, right? Just because that I'm accepting what is, that does not mean that I don't participate. That does not mean that I don't stand up for what I would believe is the world I want to create. And so it's been intriguing to have this balance of how do I fully accept this thing that I don't like? How do I even get over the not liking it? And yet, how do I then choose to engage the situation in order to influence change? And it's been this very interesting dance back and forth to try to learn how to not complain and yet still interact and participate in a way that I want to be participating in the situation. How do we then best sort of cultivate this attitude? Well, the interesting thing is if you recognize that you are complaining, that you are resenting something, and you tell yourself, I shouldn't be complaining, then what you've just done is you're right back in the same loop, because the complaint is this shouldn't be happening. Well, if that is what you are doing in the moment, you can't tell yourself you shouldn't be doing it without just repeating the cycle. So it's a little tricky. Fortunately, the solution is simple, even if it's difficult to actually recognize, and that is you simply rest in the awareness of what's happening. So you don't try to change it, right? You don't condemn yourself for the behavior or tell yourself it should be different. You simply acknowledge and rest in the awareness that you have caught this is what's happening. And then you can choose how you would want to participate moving forward. But it's centering yourself in just the awareness of it. That's where you are then engaging in the present moment, the right now. That's when you're actually feeling the life that you are. And that's where you experience joy. Because the only place that we can experience joy is in the now. So the way that we stop complaining is simply to be aware of whatever is, to accept whatever is, even if what is at this moment is that you are complaining. So thank you for exploring this with me today, and hopefully some of these thoughts were helpful for you.